Hey guys, it's Ryan. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to knit in the round. Knitting in the round is what you need to know how to do if you want to knit socks or hats or anything that's round. To knit in the round, what you're going to need are double pointed needles. Double pointed needles are exactly what they sound like. They're pointy on both ends. And you're going to need about 5 of them at least. You can use any size of double pointed needles you want, but the thinner the needle, the tighter the fabric is going to be in your hat. Like this hat was knit with, I don't remember the size, but they were pretty thin. In this video, I'm going to be using slightly thicker needles just so you can see better, and that's going to give you a hat that's kind of like this. It's a lot stretchier and a little chunkier. So do whatever is comfortable for you, and good luck. Knitting in the round is surprisingly not too hard to learn how to do. It can get pretty complicated though because you are working with several different needles. But at the beginning, you're just going to make your slip knot as you normally would and cast on however many you want on just to one needle. Take your first needle and cast on like you normally would. I'm going to cast on around 15 to 20 stitches. So I've cast on about a little over 20 stitches, and now what you're going to do is divide these stitches up amongst 3 of your needles, so all your needles except for 1. So you can put that aside. With your stitches cast on, just scoop them off with each needle, starting at the end of this. So in this case, I'll be taking off about 5 stitches onto each needle. So just scoop them off. There's about 5 on there. When you've slid off about 5 stitches, you can just put that needle aside and then pick up your next needle and scoop off 5 more, or 4 or whatever. And now with your final needle, you can scoop off the rest. And don't be afraid to, I like to rest my needles on a table when I'm just doing this first part and getting everything ready, just to try and keep everything organized and keep from getting tangled up. So I've divided up all my stitches amongst the 4 needles, and I jumbled all mine up and made a huge mess of them like this because if it's your first time learning how to knit in the round, you're probably gonna have a bit of a tangled mess on your hands. So I'm going to work with you to detangle this, and you wanna get it into a nice little square. And the way I like to do this is I like to look at the ridge, the bumpy part of the stitches right here, and have that be the inside of my square. So that's what I use to guide my needles to make the square. Now I've situated my square so that the tail end of the yarn right here is on the left side. I'm going to have it in my left hand. And then the long part of the yarn that's connecting to everything else is on the right. So now I'm going to actually start knitting. You're going to need to take your 5th needle now, and you're going to start knitting at this tail section. So you're going to be taking the yarn from here and connecting it to the tail. And it's going to be kind of confusing and tight, and the needles are going to make a lot of noise, so you can either keep them on a table or you can pick them up even. Just remember not to get them twisted or tangled up. Slide it through and then take the long end of the yarn from the end of my square of needles and slide that over and just start knitting that row. And I like to pick all my needles up when I'm doing this first part, but if it's your first time learning how to do this, you can definitely leave it on a table or on your lap, whatever is easiest, or if you want to try and keep the square organized, you can do it however you want. So Now I've knit that first needle and replaced it with my new needle, so you can take that. And now you'll want to move on to the next needle. So if you're holding your needles, you can just tell that the next needle to knit is this one. You can just follow this path of the inside of that square. Or you can lay it out on the table again just to get yourself oriented again. But take the 5th needle now and knit off that next row of stitches from the needle. Now I've finished that next needle and I'm just going to take off my new 5th needle and move on to the next one. Here is a prime example of a tangled mess. I know that this is the next needle that I need to do, but there is a twist in that. So be sure to pay attention to those and then twist them out so you don't mess up your hat or whatever you're knitting. Here's what my square looks like now. So there's a layer of new stitches going all the way around the square, and we still kept that evenness. There's no tangles or twists or anything like that. Here's the end of my yarn right here, but now it's actually connected by that first needle that we knit off. And then here's the long part of the yarn. And so now what we're just going to do is repeat that over and over again. So we're going to take the yarn from here and knit this needle first, and then knit this one, knit this one, and then knit this one. And you'll keep going around and around in a circle, and eventually your hat or your sock or just any sort of tube is going to start growing up and getting taller and taller and taller. It's going to be coming out this way. I'm going to show you how to do that again. It might be actually a little easier now that we have a thicker row of loops. And as you keep going, it will get easier and easier. And if you're afraid that some of these needles are going to slip out, don't worry, because as you go along, things will get tighter and tighter, and the risk of losing a needle or losing a set of stitches is going to be less and less. So as you can tell and as you can hear from the needles, I'm not really caring what the other 3 needles are doing right now. I'm just focusing on these 2 needles with this to knit off this first row of stitches. And with that row finished and that needle finished, I can look and see where the next section is that needs to be knit. So it's this needle right here. And bring the yarn over. Grab the 5th needle that's free and start knitting it. Now I've gone around the square one more time, so we have another row done, and you're just going to repeat that until it keeps growing out. But I want to show you a couple more things. You'll see that at the corners of this square, there's still a lot of space. If you're a pretty tight knitter, this probably won't be a problem for you. But when you're first starting to learn how to knit in the round, you'll definitely have corners that are pretty loose and they'll get these little holes forming. So what I like to do is before I pick up my 5th needle, I like to set that off onto the side and then just knit 1 or 2 stitches off of one of the rows and onto the next one. So I'm just going to knit 2 off, and what that does is it basically moves the corner of the square to over here where it's tight. So now if you put your square out, that really loose gap that we had over here has been pulled tight. And now you can just take your 5th needle and then knit like usual. And as I go, I like to do that with actually almost every new needle that I have to knit. I like to knit 1 or 2 off just so I can move the corners and keep everything nice and even and tight. So now I've gone around and around my little square a couple times, and now I'm left with this. And really that's all you do with knitting in the round. You just keep knitting and knitting, and eventually a hat starts growing. But I want to show you a couple things in terms of the stitches. If you haven't noticed already, your stitches are always, if you're just doing the knit stitch, you're always going to be having a stockinette pattern start forming on the outside of your hat. So it's really nice. You don't have to worry about turning your needles over or knitting the inside or anything like that. It's always going to be the stockinette that forms. But because the stockinette stitch likes to curl, as you keep going, this will start curling upwards just because that's how the fabric goes with the stockinette. So a lot of times what people like to do when it's like a hat or a pair of socks is they'll like to knit cables running up and down here. And to do that, you would just do knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl in some sort of pattern like that, some sort of combination, and that helps keep everything straight, or it allows you to fold it up and over so it's like the brim of a hat. Play around with the different combinations you can do. Feel free to purl a row and see what it would look like on the hat, or start doing a ribbed pattern of some sort. And then you can also cable knit pretty easily with knitting in the round. And as you can see, now that I've knit a couple rows up, everything is a lot more stable. I can see the shape of my hat a lot better, and I'm not too worried about one of these needles slipping out and falling or losing my stitches. It's pretty nice once you get going. So those are the basics of knitting in the round. I'll be doing a couple more videos on how to knit specific things like hats and socks, but for now just practice that and see what cool things you can make. And feel free to like or subscribe if you found the video to be particularly useful, and I'll see you next time.